Every day, I'm either in the House of Representatives or in the Senate or working with the SEC or the CFTC, and I see a lot that's happening in the regulatory and legislative space. So I thought it would be great if I could lend some of my insights here to help folks that not only care about this technology but also are interested in the future of democratized financial access. In Congress, uh, our elected representatives are responsible in the legislative branch for writing the legislation, which creates the rules that tell the regulators in the executive branch what type of rules they have to promulgate that provides the regulatory framework that all of our, financial institutions operate by. And so we do not get durable, responsible digital asset policy and regulation if the legislative branch and the executive branch, if they don't work together. And so right now there's a legislative vehicle moving through Congress called the Clarity Act, and that's broadly going to define probably for the future of U.S. competition and access for digital assets and market structure. Every single state has to determine what they want a framework to be for institutions, digital commodity exchanges that are operating and providing services to citizens in their state. And that creates a broad-based patchwork of laws where every single state can have a completely different set of rules that would make it difficult for citizens to retain the exact same type of services and access to tools that they would like traveling through the United States. And there might be restrictions to accessing certain product offerings and technology types if we do not have a responsible federal framework that applies to all citizens equally. Tools like Stand with Crypto and Peach Check allow citizens that care about the future of finance, decentralized technologies, to marry their policy desires with their political power at the ballot box. And so if you believe in electing state, local, federal representatives that represent your policy interests, and you care about the future of this industry, these community-owned scorecards allow you to have an easy way to build coalitions and coalesce around policymakers that have demonstrated through their voting record that they have a track record of supporting responsible digital asset market structure legislation. And I think it's great because the more information voters have, the more informed they are when they're going to the ballot box and engaging with their representatives by visiting them in DC or visiting their district offices. So I think these community-owned scorecards are great. And they allow for the everyday citizen to get insight into what's happening in DC. It's very easy for you to believe the political whims and promises of maybe misaligned politicians that would like your vote but don't represent your interests. These scorecards allow you to actually see whose walk matches their talk, and so that when you do not feel like you voted for someone that was disingenuous, and then you got to wait 2-6 years for them to get out of power for you to restart the entire process. One of the benefits of decentralized finance is removing that middleman, removing that point of intermediation where there can be maybe a subjective check that could block you from getting access to lending options and liquidity. And so you're going to see, hopefully in the future, as retail adoption increases and we have these sound, responsible rules of the road, there's going to be more individuals that are considering, hey, maybe I can get access on chain versus going to my regular traditional institution. You can get better lending outcomes and favorable borrowing outcomes, so it can be a two-way street for the lender and the borrower. And then additionally, we're seeing an explosion of decentralized ID. Normally people have conversations about what type of ID they can take with them and what they can use to get access either to a doctor, to the DMV, to vote. Decentralized identity allows you to have a credentialed, self-hosted way in which you could verify your identity, but only the portions of your ID that you need to get access to whatever application you need. You don't have to demonstrate or expose, or for lack of a better term, dox your entire ID. If maybe an application only needs to know, is this person just older than 18, or do they just live in the state? Decentralized identity allows you to have still grants you access, but still protects you with privacy. And so I think these type of tools are what regular everyday citizens will find immediate benefit for now. If you want to protect ownership, you've got to start with owners. And what do owners want? The ability to take custody, right? So you want to have a regulatory framework that preserves the right for you to own your own wallets, custody your own assets, and engage in protected peer-to-peer transactions. Additionally, you also want the ability to develop technology and develop software. That's your First Amendment right, that's protected. And so you want a durable but flexible and tailored regulatory framework that scales requirements to whatever level of development or ownership that you're on. So if you're an individual that's developing non-custodial software, well, there's a certain amount of protections that are afforded to you because you're not taking custody of owner funds. However, if you're an individual that's taking custody on behalf of a consumer and transmitting that funds, you might have a different compliance requirement, right? And a responsible, reactive regulatory framework ensures that different levels of risk receive different levels of compliance standards. And I think a sound regulatory framework still protects your right as an individual to own the assets you want, but it scales per use case. And then also we need strong consumer protections. The easiest way to get taken out of the financial system is one, either low digital literacy, or two, not having strong consumer protection guardrails to ensure that bad actors are held accountable, or that institutions can't run rampant and abuse you in your interactions. And I think a responsible regulatory framework should be able to check back for bad actors, but also hopefully allow for standards to be developed for the everyday individual, it's easier to use, that there's not a massive digital literacy gap before individuals can interact on chain. I would say you have to make sure that you're one, voting. Uh, every U.S. citizen has the ability to take political power into their own hands by ensuring that their interests are represented at the ballot box. Next, organizations like my own, the Decentralization Research Center, we work at the intersection of academia, industry, and policymakers to ensure that builders of decentralized technology, users of and benefactors of that technology have their voice heard in the halls of Congress and in meetings with regulators. And I think it's important, regardless of whether you live in DC, can never travel to DC, or maybe you're back home in your state, there's ways for you to get involved in the political process, whether it's through state and local elections, or communicating with your federal representatives. Hey, listen, we would prefer that you vote this way. This is a regulatory framework that I believe is going to protect myself and my community, and this is why. You want to make sure that you're using every single tool at your disposal to make sure that your voice is heard in the political process. And that comes through, academia, think tanks, again, exercising your right to vote, and just being a civically engaged individual, because if you do not remain engaged, the rules will be written for you. And that's been demonstrated in a whole host of industries when citizens just sit back and trust other people to take actions for them that they should be involved in.